Hello, everybody. This is Michael Matherly, Head of Global Compliance at BUPTI. I am very pleased to be with two women leaders of global EOR companies and very pleased to be at the Boundless event, Bridging the Atlantic, that the Boundless team has invited me to here in New York City. We've just come from the event that Dee and her team hosted, and they both served on the panel. So I appreciate them coming straight to another interview and getting what I hope will be some different questions. During the panel today, I was marking off the questions that Gemma, your moderator from the prior panel, was asking. So hopefully these will be some fresh new questions. But before we jump into the interview, would love to hear both of you introduce yourself, introduce your company. And then we'll get started. Dee, why don't we start with you since you're our host?
Sure. Thank you, Michael. And it is wonderful to finally meet you in person because we have spent a lot of time talking behind screens. And that's the beauty of events like our breakfast this morning, that we can bring people together in person. My name is Dee Coakley. I am co-founder and CEO at Boundless, and Boundless is a global employer of record. I spent many years in COO roles of B2B software companies, where I very organically found myself leading international teams and felt firsthand the struggles of running teams across many different countries. And that's why we founded Boundless, to try and solve some of those problems and make all of that journey a little easier for companies with distributed teams.
Very good. Thanks, Dee. Kara?
Hi, thanks for having us on your podcast today. And thanks for having me on your panel this morning. It's been a wonderful experience so far. But I'm Kara Hertzog with Innovative Employee Solutions, also known as IES. We are also a global employer of record and agent of record company. And I have a little bit of a different story than Dee in that it's a family business for me, which are few and far between in this landscape nowadays. But my grandfather started it and had my mom running a staffing branch in San Diego. And in 98, we sold the staffing piece of the business and just kept what's now known as employer of record. Back then was called payrolling. And there weren't as many standalone employer of records back then, but we've been that ever since 1998. And I'm honored to be a part of the legacy.
Yeah, that's wonderful. We all have our own unique stories, and those are two good ones. So we're all in the same room, not by accident, but because we are talking to each other. If you could, both of you or one of you, share with us how you're looking at maybe partnering with each other. Obviously, Dee being an Irish company and IES being located in San Diego, there's some opportunities for you. Tell me about what brought you together and how you guys are looking at the opportunity between your two companies.
So we have many customers here in the United States and many clients overseas. We have clients in 30 different countries, and we do get asked about support for the United States quite regularly. And over the years, I've met various employers of record, but also PEOs here in the US. And it was always very important to me that we would find a partner here that shared our values and shared our focus on very, very high quality customer experience. So we came across IES, I don't know how long ago now, maybe 4 or 5 months ago. Yep. We've been spending quite a lot of time together. Other members of our team have also been spending time together, looking at our two businesses where we have overlap, where we have clients that have needs that IES could fulfill, where IES's clients have needs that we could fulfill. And we've just felt like it made sense for us to partner up and support each other's client bases as and where that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just add that there's a lot of employer of records to choose from in the market now. It didn't used to be, but finding somebody that shares your same values for your internal and external staff, as well as putting such a high value on customer service and tech, I think can be rare. So we were happy to find each other.
Yeah, not a surprise to me to hear you both mention the importance of customer service. And it's part of the reason that myself and my company, BUPTI, are continuing to talk to both of you, because we're interested and we're really gravitating towards your ability and your focus on customer service, because it's such an important aspect of the employee of record service offering. Talk to us a little bit about the distinction that you're trying to make or that you believe is inherent in your companies versus what appears to be a bit of a trend with some of the bigger technology providers who are and these are my words, trying to automate 100% of the EOR process. Talk to us about the importance of how you're approaching it.
Well, I think what we call ourselves is a full service EOR. And what that means is that while we use technology to perform onboarding tasks and compliance tasks, et cetera, we really try to make sure that all of our workers know who we are and that they can reach anybody by a touch of a phone call. And having that full service, I think is so important because people have questions, especially in America, about maternity leave or different types of leave they can have, or do they qualify for sick pay? And while you can use AI to answer a lot of those questions, not everybody wants to use that. And so we feel it's important that there's always a human element to it. I like to say you can't always fire or hire people through technology, and so we like to keep that personal touch.
Yeah, totally agree. And that's why we like to continue to talk to you guys, because you place such a high emphasis on it as we do as well. One of the things that we touched on in the panel earlier that I'm going to ask about is the risk of permanent establishment for the companies that you're helping gain access to talent globally. Talk a little bit more about that and how you're advising or guiding them. We see that on the IC compliance side, of course, but it's also something that's prevalent on the EOR side that a lot of companies don't think about.
It sure is prevalent. It's a real risk and concern. We do see that some employers of record will either imply or straight up say that EOR will eliminate all risk when it comes to permanent establishment, and that's simply not true. And it's important to take a look at the country where the workers are based. Very important to look at the type of work that they're doing. This is a broad brush stroke statement. We are not experts in corporate tax, I should say. We're the employment tax people, not on the corporate side. So we always tell people to get advice. But broad brush strokes, if people are working in sales roles, if they are directly selling to sales prospects, there is a good chance that you will be building out a PE risk in that country. It gets less clear when it's go-to-market roles that aren't quite sales. And then when the workers are, for example, software engineers, designers, product people, that risk is very heavily reduced. So it's less likely you'll have an issue with people in those roles. But it is an area to get advice from a real expert.
And it's not just as simple as saying, oh, I want some talent out of France, or I want some talent out of, fill in the blank country. There are other risks other than classification risk, which is, I think the point is there's a lot more to be thinking about other than does the worker or the assignment meet the classification criteria. And that's one of the things that we try to emphasize as well. Kara, in the US, there's been a fair amount, and globally as well, there's been a fair amount of conversation recently about the, and I'm going to use the term that we've all heard, the relevancy of the MSP providers. And there's this concept or this idea out there that because of the growth of the freelance segment of the contingent labor workforce, that the EORs are starting to encroach a little bit on some of the MSP program offering. I'd love for you to speak to that. And do you see that happening as well? And what are some justifications for doing that? Or what are some blockers that you might see in EOR going into the MSP space?
I think EORs have been lucky in that we are asked to come to the table quite a bit more and provide more consultative and strategic advice, much more so than used to be. But there's still quite the need for MSPs because while we can provide advice on one area, many of us are not staffing firms as well. And I think that MSPs do a great job of building the bridge between all the different suppliers that a company might need. But I do think that MSPs are also being asked to shift into the proactive consultant strategic role. And for those that don't, I think the relevance of them, will need to be talked about in the future, because it isn't just helping companies fill recs any longer, whether it's through pre-identified talent or through temp staffing talent or through freelance management platforms. And but it is more of, how do you incorporate new things into the program? How do you bring direct sourcing into a program? And I think the more the MSPs can consult, but also consult with their partners, and you come into it with collaboration to present to a client, I think the more successful we'll all be.
No, I like how you positioned that. I tend to disagree that EORs are going to take over and push MSPs out of the market. I think there's always this constant shift of who's doing what, and we're an industry, we're an ecosystem, if there ever was one, where we've got a lot of different players that come together to provide the end client the solution. So I think we will continue to find a way to work and play nicely together in the same sandbox.
I agree.
Yeah.
And it's important to do so. I think neither side should be scared of each other.
No, it's a great point,
Yeah.
because I know that there is some concern on some of the MSP side, but I really think that they've established themselves in a good way. But I love how the EORs, because of the relevance to the freelancer segment of the market, really are starting to take a more prominent role. And it's one of the reasons that we, BUPTI, in BUPTI Compliance Services, which is what I focus on for IC compliance and agent of record, that's why we really believe that bringing the two service provisions together, EOR, employee of record, and agent of record. And why don't we use that as a segue into the next question, which is, how do you envision a full solution that you would give to your end clients, knowing that there's multiple ways to engage freelancers? Dee, how do you and your organization kind of approach making that determination and making sure that not only are the way that you're engaging them compliant, but the way you're engaging is the right business decision for your customers?
Sure. So most businesses at any point in time will have a variety of worker classifications, and they'll have different needs, particularly once a business is operating internationally. They'll have varying needs across different countries, and then even in one country, they will have a variety of different needs. We have come from a background where we have historically been solely focused on employer of record. So we tend to talk to businesses at the point where they've realized they potentially have a worker classification risk because they have some ICs that have been working with them long term. We are broadening the scope of how we support customers. We get a lot of demand to offer broader advice. So we are starting to support customers with HR advisory support as well in a broader way, sometimes in countries where the employer of record operating model isn't compliant. And this means that we can be more involved in this type of strategic discussion. And Michael, you've mentioned collaboration there. You've mentioned this type of real partnership approach with the customer where you're being strategic and helping them figure out how to solve problems. As we move more into an AI age, many processes are automated, and the repetitive type work around something like payroll or employee onboarding. And I know, Cara, you've mentioned that you guys are using AI around onboarding of workers. As those tasks get automated, it leaves space for real expert work from the real experts. And that's where we can get more strategic with our customers and support them as they make these decisions, as they're transitioning workers from IC to permanent employees, or where they're seeing their business evolve and they have projects come up that are more contingent in nature, and where they make decisions to lean more into contingent working at a point in time. But in terms of the actual compliance piece and the product that we provide, we are very focused on employment. So that great opportunity to work with platforms like BUPTI that are more focused on the contingent worker and managing the processes around that contingent worker.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Cara, anything to add to that?
No, I think it's really important well, I'll take a step back. We expanded to offer global agent of record services because it has become such a need, especially on the enterprise level. And to Dee's point, I think that every customer uses either independent contractors or external workers in such different ways that being able to speak to both arenas and really do what's best for the client and for that worker so that you're able to put them in the right classification has become so important. And having a strategic spot at the table has been really fun because it didn't used to be that way.
Yeah.
It was, here's some people and do your thing with them. And now it's been a really exciting conversations in the marketplace about all the different types of talent.
Yeah, and you bring up something interesting. We've been around long enough to remember the days where there was, part of the knock against EOR/AOR companies was that there was little effort put into the actual screening and just sort of almost a default engagement model of EOR, payrolling them, which costs more and is lower risk for the service provider. And talk to me about how does that weigh into kind of the solution that you're trying to build and provide to your customers, really giving them kind of the best engagement model selection for them to optimize based on their criteria. Does that work into kind of how you support the customers? I know, Kara, especially with you guys, you do IC compliance and EOR as well.
Yeah, I think companies like ours sometimes get a bad rap that you never want to pass anybody on an independent contractor level because you do tend to make a little more money on an EOR engagement. But that's not how we approach it ever. And you always want to do what's best for the client and the worker. If somebody qualifies, it absolutely should be an IC. And, the research and speculation about where independent contractor business is just going to boom. And I don't have the number off the top of my head, but it's just billions of dollars.
Yeah.
So it's just going to be more and more commonplace. So you better get on board because it's here to stay.
Yeah, and I can remember being when I was managing the category at Capital One, a heavily regulated bank. Back in the early 2000s, we had a no 1099 or no IC policy because we felt that was the best way to manage the risk. And it was a fair business decision because I worked with the folks to make that policy. But these days, I still understand when some heavily regulated companies do it, but identifying the risk and managing the risk and becoming IC classification proper is a little more achievable. Would you agree with that? In that the risk is manageable more so now that we have some visibility as opposed to what it was before?
Well, the states have made it pretty clear as to what qualifies and what doesn't. It's how much you want to listen to it, I think, is the gray area sometimes. But while the classification laws change, by the minute, I do think there are lots of tools out there like BOPT services and others out there that make it fairly easy to determine if they qualify or not. And I think it is such an important sector to incorporate to your FTEs, to your contingent workforce, all of it, that you'd be missing out on a great population of workers to fill a very specific need if you say no, no more ICs, you're only a W-2 worker for U.S. purposes. And not everybody wants to work as a W-2. We've had people for clients, they just are itching to bring that talent in, and the worker will refuse to go on as a W-2.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that on the U.S. side, but I'm starting to see it a little bit on the global side as well. Dee, do you see that as well? Kind of the talent themselves sort of making their preferences known? And some of them actually go the other way. They want the taxes taken out.
Right.
They want the Social Security paid. They don't want to bother with being their own business. Talk to us about your experience on the talent side globally.
So when we think about it from the worker's perspective, the influencing factors are cultural. And that's culture in terms of nationality, the country that the worker lives in, but also culture in the sector that they work in. So independent contracting has been very popular in the tech sector, for example, for many years. And this has changed a little, but quite a few years ago, people that were independent contractors were earning a much higher income than those in salaried roles. So there have been workers who have that preference, and they're very reluctant to go on payroll because they have more control over their expenses and how they're managing their expenses, and control on how they're reporting on them, which can be important to some people. But that is at times offset by the culture locally and country. So, for example, Ireland, the UK, the average worker is not required to file a personal tax return. So that's very different to the US or France, where the entire population files a personal tax return. So a lot of workers in countries like the UK and Ireland, if a company suggests to them that they must manage their own tax affairs, that can be terrifying for some workers. And some workers will not consider that. They want all of their payroll handled by the company that they're working for. They want all of their taxes paid by that company, and they want to know that they then have full access to all of their entitlements as an employee worker in that country. So the reality with risk is that risk evolves. The level of risk evolves due to compliance and regulatory shifts and changes. But changing tides economically and at an organization's own individual level. So as an organization matures, as there are changes in leadership, you get evolving appetites for risk in an organization. And that gets reflected then in hiring policy and policies around things like independent contracting. And companies and leaders want and expect their vendors to take a pragmatic approach, to listen, to understand where that organization is at in a point in time in terms of their appetite for risk and how much they need or want to lean in absolute terms to compliance requirements. So there's a lot of nuance there. And again, that's where that consultative collaborative approach becomes all important.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. But we're also speaking about something that I think is one of the shifts yet to happen, or at least fully, is the shift towards freelancer focus, right? What is best for the freelancer? What are some tools, some accessories, some benefits, some caretaking of the individual freelance talent that are out there that go beyond kind of whether how they're classified or how they're engaged? What do you see along those lines? I'd love to hear both of your opinions. The focus on shifting towards talent. Do you think it's coming, and where do you think that focus will be?
Do you mean by to offer benefits or perks type, that you would FTEs or W-2 workers in the States?
It could be kind of regulatory to sort of bring them up from a benefits perspective, but also just, continuing the remote work, continuing the making it easy to engage. How you package the work, or how the clients package the work for them to do. Pay, other benefits that might be included.
Yeah, some states have already put some rules around that. And that you have to offer them, certain pay structure, yet they have to be paid within 30 days. So I do see more and more of that coming. And I've had conversations with some independent contractors that like that and some that don't. They want to do what they want, when they want, where they want. And I think it kind of depends on where you are in that spectrum as to if you think it's a good idea or not. But one of the things that I think is a common misstep amongst clients with their independent contractors is that they don't always bring them into the fold and into the culture of the company, and for fear that they'll be considered part of their company, and even from a W-2 temp basis as well, they're worried about co-employment. But I think that is a mistake, because they can provide so much to your teams, your culture, et cetera, that they should feel a part of that. And with the shortage of talent nowadays too, you want to do everything you can to cultivate that relationship, to make the independent contractor just as happy, because you want them to return. The work in getting them up to speed on a project is cut tremendously on a reoccurrence of the same independent contractor. So keeping that relationship strong and healthy and bringing them into the fold of your company, I think is important. And I'm hoping that companies become more comfortable with doing that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Dee, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So we often see a pattern. We're interfacing with people when they've made a decision quite often to bring ICs in as permanent employees. So there is an evolution in a relationship between a company and, I say, an independent contractor, but it could be a bank or a pool of people who perhaps have been working on the same project, or have a similar kind of life cycle with the business. And there can come a point where it's appropriate and it makes sense to bring those workers initially maybe onto an EOR, and then after that to direct employment. So we have we've seen it with, I have one example I'm thinking of at the moment with someone that's had a few hundred workers on the Boundless platform. And some of those workers are in countries where they've been employed through EORs for a number of years now. Some of them are more senior. So that company is over time picking off countries and moving to direct employment in those countries, establishing their entity as a signal to those workers that they are very committed to that territory. They're very committed to those workers. Now, simultaneously, that business is looking at new countries with us, where they're starting to see emerging talent in those countries. They haven't yet made investments in those territories. So the world is a big place. There are shifting sands, and companies are looking at the experience of workers. And at any point in time, you have a different cohort of workers that you're taking on a journey and considering how they may come in under your fold in a more meaningful way.
Yeah. No, I think that you're both absolutely right. And that's what I am excited about, is kind of the evolution of our industry, and how it becomes less about compliance and about what the company needs, but also shifting to, what do the talent need, and how can we better support them in this approach to providing work that they've chosen. Hey, before we go into the final wrap-up question, Dee, I wanted to give you a chance, since you are a host and you were sharing some wonderful data, global salary related data today. Take a moment to give yourself and the data that you provided are making available a plug.
Sure. So this is our second year running where we've published an ebook on the cost of employment as that compares across a range of countries. So last year we looked at a set of European countries. I think we had 20 odd countries in there. We've really expanded the list of countries that we're looking at this year. We have 36 European countries. So every country in Europe is taken into account. Today, we looked at how some of those countries, key cities in those countries, compare to some key hiring hubs in the US. There are a lot of surprises for people in there. So I really encourage people to go to boundlesshq.com, look at our resources, our ebooks page, and you will find that cost of employment for 2025 ebook on there. Download it. If nothing else, it's going to give you some great conversation for when you're at a party with your friends on a Friday night and a disagreement breaks out around where workers are most heavily penalised in terms of taxation by their local governments. Because I guarantee you, your friends, or maybe you, will have some of your information wrong, because people are always surprised when they look at these numbers.
No, what I really loved about a couple of the graphs that you showed earlier this morning and during the presentation is the differentiation between some US-based city talent and some well-known markets like Paris, obviously, where there was a huge differential. But then you also were able to show, hey, don't think that it's all just a foreign country influence. Look at the difference between a Seattle and an Austin, Texas, and some other US-based city, and showing that there's differential even within the US boundaries. But then it kind of, the complexity, the third dimension of it is when you go global. It's a wealth of information. I do encourage folks, the audience, to go take a look at it at your website, and we'll put the connection and the link in the show notes as well, so people can get there easily. So we've come to the end. I want to be respectful of your time. And I know, Kara, you have a lunch meeting to get to that we want to be respectful of.
Oh,
So I'll
thanks.
end the podcast as I tend to do. Each of you take give us what do you think the future of freelance compliance is going forward? What's the influence of technology going to be on it, and what's the influence of regulatory compliance? If you could just sort of give your 60-second response to that.
So I think flexibility is going to continue to be key. Workers are going to continue to demand that flexibility, and there are many businesses that will be very conscious of headcount and fixed expenses as we go forward. So they will be very open to supporting this. But as tools improve, as they have done, and as AI brings the ability to really analyze risk and misclassification, I think that governments are going to have higher expectations around reporting and compliance because they know that monitoring and awareness is growing all the time amongst the business community. So there are fewer places to hide now with the dawning of these technology platforms.
Yeah, brilliant. Kara?
Mine is maybe more of a wish than where I think it's going to be, but I do hope that they make it easier for workers to have that flexibility. I do think that the compliance avenue hasn't kept up with the way people want to work. I mean, even for onboarding purposes. I mean, people want people yesterday, and sometimes for background checks, you're still, not that they're necessarily prevalent for ICs, but you're still having to go to a courthouse to get the background check completed. And so those types of things, I hope, find a way to catch up with how fast employment is moving, whether you're an IC or a worker. And I think especially with the flexibility, as Dee was saying, will be so important that you have the ability to lose great talent if you aren't flexible with the options that you give them for employment.
Yeah. No, I love that, and I think it's very fair to wish when we think about the future. I think we should all try to bring our best wishes into our influence and our impact on the future. Dee and Kara, this has been lovely. Thank you so much for making time in your busy schedule. And Dee, thank you again for inviting us here and being a host. We're here at the Irish Consulate. I'm going to go do some videoing of the surroundings and give people a feel of how special a morning that you've put together for us. So just want to thank you both so much, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you,
It's been
Kara.
great. It was great. We've got to meet in person for the first time too.
Yeah,
It was wonderful.
I couldn't resist the opportunity to take the future of compliance on its first, geographic
Roadshow?
on show.
Maybe
Yeah.
the first of many, Michael. We'll have to get you over to Dublin.
Don't think I haven't already thought of that. And I'm also thinking San Diego as well.
Absolutely. I'll come to Dublin though too. So.
Perfect.
Okay, it's a date.
All right.
Talk about incorporating our wishes into the future. Hey, thank you both so much. Have a lovely rest of the day and enjoy your visit to New York City. Take care.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank
too.
you.
And we'll quit. All right.
right.
That was
Amazing.
wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You make it easy.